For the girl who's been told to quiet down, calm down, sit down, or just leave it to the men, this one's for you. Hello my lovely friends, it's Margaret, and it is time for another installment of Fresh Reads Friday. If you happen to have just stumbled on my channel, this is part of a series where I do in-depth, spoiler-free reviews of recent reads that I think you should check out. So this Friday's book is going to be To Best the Boys by Mary Weber. I was sent an e-arc of this through NetGalley for my honest review, so thank you so much to the publisher. I was so happy to receive this. If you didn't know, this is one of my most anticipated books of this half of the year, so I was so excited to be able to get my hands on it and read it ahead of time and be able to maybe help build the hype. I've already told so many of my friends to read this because it was so good. I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. It was what I was looking for at the time, and it made me very happy. But that's not what you came here for. You want to know a little bit more. This is about Ren. She is, I think, 17. She's a 17-year-old girl living in a society where men are very much the ones involved in the sciences and everything, and women just kind of take care of the house. However, Ren's father is a scientist, and she's been following in his footsteps. Unfortunately, since she is a woman, she can't really get any formal education to continue on until she decides she is going to enter in the annual scholarship contest disguised as a boy. The Mulan storyline, I'm a sucker for that storyline. Like girls pretending to be boys to get stuff done? Yes. Thank you. I'm going to go into some general thoughts about what I liked and didn't like, and then I will break down some of the things about the character, the plot, and the world building that really struck me. First off, I just loved how effortlessly feminist this was, how beautifully it just worked with the plot. Unless you really know what to look for, you're not going to be like, oh yeah, this is definitely a feminist novel, but it still has a lot of feminist ideals when it comes to women and women's place in society. I really liked how, even though this was a plot where it could very much have been very overwhelmed by male characters, she still managed to sneak in a few female characters who are very influential to the plot. So it wasn't just like one girl amongst all of these boys. She really did have a world where we see women in various levels of society and in various circumstances. And I really liked, now this is not the most diverse novel you will ever read. I might have missed a few things when I was reading it because I'm a fast reader, but it was very white. Just mostly white characters as far as I can tell, all white characters. But I did really like what it had to say, the commentary that it had on wealth and privilege and how that changes things in society. I really liked what she had to say about that, and what she had to say about what the wealthy, their duty to society, how those few that are in charge are supposed to listen to everyone that they follow, not just the people who are up there with them. I loved that. I loved how she worked that in. It was just it worked with the plot very well, because this plot is very much a plot where Ren, who is brilliant, is held back not just because she's a woman, but because her family is a poorer family, because her mother gave up a whole bunch of wealth to actually be able to marry her father. They had all of that. They were talking about that, and you saw, it brought up the question of what could her father, who was brilliant, have done if he had been able to afford a formal education. I just really liked the commentary on that. It was great. And it wasn't overbearing. It was just there. It was part of the story. It was organic. There were just a few things that I'm hoping were fixed in, because I got an arc. So these are very early in the drafts. There's still a lot of editing that happens after you get an arc. So I'm hoping that maybe some of the things like speech tags, kind of who's talking, gets clarified, but it was a little bit confusing. The beginning was a little bit muddled, and I'm going to get into that in a little bit and kind of have more thoughts on that. But there weren't a lot of negatives for me, other than the fact that it wasn't very diverse racially. There was a little bit of neurodivergence, so I really appreciated that. That actually leads beautifully into Ren, because Ren is a dyslexic. And one of the things I loved about Ren's character is, even though she is dyslexic, she doesn't think she's stupid. She understands that sometimes she has to be a little bit more careful. She has to take care with things like reading and equations, but that doesn't make her doubt her intelligence, and that was really refreshing, because I know that can be a real struggle with a lot of people. She's actually home taught because she wasn't able to make it through school because of her dyslexia. She was just such a fun character because she's so sciencey and so detail and fact oriented. There's one point where something kind of upsetting is happening, and she is comforting this other person. I mean, it works because they get her, but she's trying to comfort them with straight up gruesome facts. And it is anytime there's something that's uncomfortable for her, she starts spouting random weird facts that she knows about the human body and the world around them, and it's the funniest thing, and it's so relatable. I'm uncomfortable. I'm just gonna give you like random trivia about something to do with kind of maybe possibly the situation. It was so great. Also, her cousin is a hoot, and I love the fact like her cousin, even though her cousin is raised in a more privileged background, and she's raised to be more like the kind of like the typical woman in this society, she's still smart. She still knows some of the sciencey stuff. She's still like got Ren's back, and so I love that we got to see a little bit of her in the book. It was great. I also really loved both of the romances, especially the main romance. The main romance gave me life, especially considering I had just come off of a book where I was very disappointed in the romance because there was none. Now, the boy was a little bit of an idiot, especially at the beginning, but through that, they're able to have a really interesting commentary about listening to women and not assuming what you hear about women is what's happening, because like the boy is trying to be respectful, but he's upset about something that's happening, but he doesn't have the whole story, and like it was a little frustrating at times, but at the same time, once they like the way it was resolved was really, I appreciated it. I loved it. A lot of the other dudes, the scholarship contest is a whole bunch of kids that can already afford to go to this college, like Lord of the Fliesing it, so that they can get this scholarship and go to this college for free. And like there are some of the lower class kids that try, but a lot of them don't necessarily have the education to do it. Some of the guys that enter this contest, just like, like they are straight up out of Lord of the Flies, if what I've heard of the plot of that book is correct. And I would have liked to see them have much worse happen to them than what did happen, because they were awful. And you just really enjoyed seeing them get at least a little bit of what they deserved. One of the things I also liked was one of the characters had Down syndrome, as was autistic, based off of the author's own, I think her nephew, someone in her life. Like she actually based the dyslexia and the autism off of people who were actually in her life. But the way that it kind of explained, it was really nice, because you did get a little kind of mini education in autism. From what I understand and from what I've heard from people who have children with autism, it was very accurate to how those kids can be kind of hypersensory and how you have to kind of adjust and work around them. And that was really, like, that was nice to see that in a fantasy novel, because I feel like we don't see a lot of that in fantasy. We might see some mental illness, stuff like that, but we don't see a lot of neurodivergence in the more, like, fantasy novels. Okay, so now what I was saying about the plot, it was a little muddled at the beginning. There was a whole bunch of stuff happening right at the beginning, maybe a little too much action, in my opinion. Also some questions about the world building, but we'll get there in a minute. But once you got into the plot and got into what was happening and you were meeting the rest of the cast of characters, it started working for me. Because, I mean, there were places where I was, at the very beginning, the first chapter, so I was just like, if the rest of the book had been like that, I don't think I would have finished it. But then after you get into chapter like 2 or 3 and start getting into what's going on, and we're taking more time getting to know the characters and all of that, it did kind of smooth out. And so the rest of the pacing for the novel was really good. I thought that she handled that very well. I really enjoyed it. Like, you had moments for those sweet, soft moments. You had really hectic moments where everyone is dying or going to die or something like that. I thought it was a pretty fast-paced novel. I did not have, like, I wasn't struggling to move pages along. I kept going through it. I wanted to know, like, it kept me wondering, okay, what's going to happen next? You have the big plot arc and the big question, is she going to be able to make it through the maze without being found out? But then, like, there would be little, like, kind of internal, personal challenges that weren't necessarily the main plot of let's not die in the maze, that you would end up, like, you'd spend a few chapters going, okay, well, was this going to happen? And then you would get the resolution of that. But then very shortly another thing would be introduced, and so, but is this what's going to happen with, like, she did a really good job of that, and I really appreciated her kind of, like, puzzle solving. I'm not a big fan of puzzle solving, like, as it happens in the plot and how it works, but I thought she did a pretty good job with the puzzles that she introduced and how the characters worked through them and the amount of time that they ended up taking with them. From there, we get into the world building, which I feel like this is a book that is much more focused on the characters than it is on the world building. That's just, I mean, it was an interesting world, it was an interesting concept, it was kind of this mix of science and magic, and I wasn't entirely sure that I understood it. Now, I'm not sure how much of that is something that would be clear on a subsequent reread, because I do plan on rereading this. I really enjoyed it, and I would really like to to see what the finished product looks like, but there were a few places, like there's magic. You have ghouls and some other things, so there are some undead creatures, and I was really interested in this world, and I'm wondering if her other books happen in this world, because I would totally, like, be down for that. Also, there was science, and there was one thing that bugged me, because she was talking about there's this disease that Ren is trying to solve, and her mother has it, and actually what the disease sounds like is, it sounds like she based it off of Lou Gehrig's. But, like, there was a point where, like, she's being all careful with the gloves and everything. This is in the first chapter, it's not a spoiler. And talking about how if you don't handle the blood correctly, you could possibly be infected by this disease. But then they get splattered by an exploding body, and no one's worried about whether or not they're going to get the disease from this possibly infected body. That was a little bit of a, as a person who made it through high school science, that was a little bit of a moment. And there were points where, like, there's this mysterious person, which I really liked the twist at the end. There's this person that is behind this scholarship contest that's kind of mysterious. And there were a few times where I thought they went a little bit far with the whole man behind the curtain routine. So that, I mean, it's not something that made me go, oh, I'm gonna dock this another star. One of the things that I really did like about the world building is that Ren is continually in spaces where she is surrounded by male characters, and I liked how she was aware of the fact that she is in a room full of men, no matter, like, whether they were getting kind of rowdy, whether they were getting kind of angry, whether she was trying to convince them to listen to what she had to say and what she knew about this disease. I loved how aware she was of that, and the fact that there were places where she actually was like, hold on, I need to think about my safety. I really appreciated that, but at the same time, she wasn't afraid to stand her ground and call out the unfairness of the situation and the unfairness of her being this smart person and knowing all of this stuff and still getting half as much attention and half as much credit as the boys her age who hadn't been studying this disease as much as she had. But all in all, I really enjoyed this book. I really recommend it. I thought it was a fantastic, I just loved it. It was good. It made me happy. That's all I can say about it. If you like any kind of, like, just feminist narrative in your novels, you might like this one. I really appreciated it. I really enjoyed it, and I really liked the things it had to say about women's place in society, and the fact that you could draw some parallels between, like, how girls are treated in the STEM sciences and how Ren is treated. Obviously, Ren's case is a lot, like, it's because she is kind of in a more historical setting, they're worlds apart, but still at the same time, it's hard for women to make it in STEM because of the prejudice and the fact that they're basically discouraged from it. And that's a whole other rant that I'm not going to get into because that's not what this channel is about. So let me know your thoughts on To Best the Boys, if it's one that you're looking forward to, if it's one that you've read. Let me know what you think. I would love to hear them. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. Also, hit that subscribe button. I make videos 2 to 3 times a week about books and writing, and I would love to see your lovely face here on a regular basis. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter. Those are both at the word nerd with a 3 in nerd instead of the E. That is it for now, my friends. Happy reading, and I will see you later when we will talk about more wordy, nerdy things. Bye!